This is my explanation of what the Modern Warfare 2 DLC would have been if it hadn't have been turned into Modern Warfare 3. So if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, there were some leaks before Modern Warfare 3 came out that apparently Modern Warfare 3 was originally just DLC for Modern Warfare 2. It was meant to be a 2-year game. They'd built like an expansion pack for it that would have had the Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer maps added to it, which makes more sense because it would have still been Modern Warfare 2. It would have had this kind of abridged campaign, like a little expansion pack campaign, and who knows, maybe it would have had zombies as well, although I kind of think maybe it wouldn't. Now, playing through the Modern Warfare 3 campaign, that actually makes a lot of sense. It feels like there's a huge amount of filler in it. It feels like there's tons of the story that doesn't really need to be there and doesn't really go anywhere. And it feels like there's a few missions that stand out as a much higher quality than the rest of the game. Precisely, I think there's 4 missions that stand out that I think would have made up the original Modern Warfare 2 DLC, and then at some point last year they decided that they were going to turn it into a full campaign, so they had to pad it out by adding everything else. So in this video, I'm going to go through all of the different missions and just explain how I think that Modern Warfare 2 DLC would have worked, and how it would have actually made the story much better, and it would have just made a lot more sense as part of Modern Warfare 2. Obviously, there are going to be a bunch of spoilers for basically all of the Modern Warfare 3 campaign, so if you haven't played it yet or you're sensitive to spoilers, you probably want to stop watching now. So, first of all, let's just go through each of the missions and just give you a quick overview of what happens in them as a bit of a refresher. So the first mission is Operation 627. This is quite an impressive mission. So this is where you are infiltrating a Russian gulag. It's the Verdansk gulag, I guess, the prison in Verdansk. And you're going in and breaking Makarov out. It's super atmospheric. The graphics are great. There's some really cool lighting. There's these amazing rain effects. You get some really interesting gameplay. So you kind of go up onto the walls out of the water, and then you drop down into the prison, break Makarov out, and then you have to get back up to the surface while kind of all hell's breaking loose, and then get onto the exfil chopper. That's really, really fun. It's a little bit short. I think it could have been turned into something a little bit more kind of substantial, a bit more fleshed out. But what's there is really, really cool. And while it is using the prison from Verdansk, it feels kind of notably different, I'd say, because of all of the lighting and the effects and everything like that. And you get some cool gameplay features, and we're going to talk about that with a few of the different missions. How this one does have the whole you dropping down a rope, rappelling down, interacting with the prisoners, fighting the guards, trying to help the prisoners out along. It does that thing that old Call of Duty campaigns would do, where every mission kind of has a little twist. It has something that changes the gameplay up a little bit. So Operation 627, I think, pretty cool mission. Then you get to Precious Cargo. This is not a pretty cool mission. So this is where Farah is at some docks in Urzikstan, and apparently her and Dina just have the docks to themselves. They are doing something with some missiles that they bought from Graves and Shepard, and they are trying to transport them or something like that. They've turned up these docks and there's not meant to be anyone there. And then Connie attacks, and Connie immediately killed Dina, so she's in the game for like all of about 20 seconds. And then Farah, by herself, is kind of sneaking around the docks or just running around shooting everyone, trying to find out what Connie's plans are, and then also putting trackers on the containers that have the missiles in them. These are like her missiles, or the ULF's missiles. There's loads of stuff that's weird about this mission. First of all, it takes place in some docks that don't quite seem to be the docks from the new Warzone map. Like, I've played in the docks of that new Warzone map, and they don't look like that. They don't have, like, the little fort across the river or anything like that. So, unless they're another part of the map that I didn't see, I think this is kind of a unique area. But it's built entirely using assets that we've seen before. So, it's got loads of containers, that makes up most of it. It's got the ships that we've seen in Warzone. It's got the warehouse buildings that we've seen in Warzone before. It just seems like it's kind of slapped together. And it's not a very interesting play space. And the objectives that you have to do, you know, you go around and you pick up a couple of objects, and then you interact with a couple of containers, and that's it. Like, it just ends. Seems really, really strange. And there's even like a couple of weird story beats in it. Like there's a bit where one of the containers is being driven away on the back of a truck, and they're like, well, we'll never catch up to that. It's like, why not? It's just on the back of a lorry. Like, you've got cruise missiles and stealth bombers and helicopters flying everywhere. Why could they possibly not follow a lorry as it leaves the docks? It seems utterly bizarre. Like, that seems really strange. You just watch it drive away. You probably just could have shot the tires out and stopped it. So it seems a little bit like it wasn't maybe as well thought out as some of the other missions might be. which seems a little bit strange. And I think, and we'll come back to this later, I think like this was all about getting Farah into the story. I think they wanted Farah to be a big part of the story. Most of the filler missions seem to kind of involve her and the ULF. I kind of don't think they were a part of the story at all to begin with, or at least not as big of a part as they were. Then the next mission, equally weird, this is Reactor, which features Price going into a nuclear power plant to try and find out what's happening with the missiles. I think they think there's something going on, like maybe they're trying to build nuclear warheads or something. I'm not sure if that's how it works. I don't think they'd just do that at a nuclear power plant, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. It seems weird that Price is going in by himself to assault a nuclear power plant, and this is just using an area of the new Warzone map. Like, this is the power plant. It was actually in one of the ground war maps in the beta, so most of you have seen this before. It's an open combat mission where you're wandering around that map. For some reason, Price has to destroy 3 helicopters, and he has things that he can use for that, like cruise missiles, or again, like a stealth bomber. You can just call in a stealth bomber, and it begs the question, like, why wouldn't they have just done that straight away if that's the sort of firepower they can bring down to bear? Although, oddly, I tried using a stealth bomber, and it didn't destroy one of the helicopters, even though it got a direct hit. Very, very strange. Anyway, yeah, so you go around as Price, you kill a load of people in a power station, blow up a bunch of helicopters, and then you go into the reactor and you find out that they aren't going to be using nuclear warheads, they're going to be using some sort of chemical weapon. And that's kind of the only story point of that entire mission. So whereas Precious Cargo, the only story point really is that Farah had some missiles and they got stolen, the reactor story point is the missiles have chemical in them. That's kind of it. Both of those, I think, could have just been done with a brief cutscene. And it would have been kind of shocking in itself if the missiles already had chemical warheads in, because obviously previously we've seen Farah with her brother Hadir, where he wanted to use chemical weapons and she was dead set against it. It would be kind of interesting if there was a bit of a twist of like, oh, she's got to a point in her life, to a point in a war, where she's actually starting to think her brother was right after we killed him in the Atomgrad raids. Like, she thinks actually they do want to use chemical weapons. Task Force 141 to find out about it. That would have been maybe interesting, but instead, no, she doesn't know what's on the missiles. Then you have Payload. So this is another Price mission where you go to Atomgrad, which is, as I said, where the raids in Modern Warfare 2 took place. I don't think the raids were very popular. I don't think many people did them. I don't think we'll see them again. But they all took place in this really boring missile silo in Atomgrad. And that's where this one takes place. They do kind of make some allusions to the fact that you've been there before, but it just feels really kind of slapped together. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. They don't seem to make a big deal of the fact that, you know, they've stopped a missile here before, launched by Hadir. Anyway, the idea is that all of the different people in Task Force 141 are going to different sites to try and stop these missiles from launching. Price goes, kills a bunch of people, gets into the missile thing. They manage to stop their missile, but a couple of the other missiles do end up launching, and Price kind of stands there being like, oh no, the missiles are launching. And that's kind of it. So again, all of these 3 missions really could have been summed up with a brief cinematic where maybe some missiles get launched and they're like, oh, these seem to have been launched by the ULF. And then Farah explains what's happened. But instead we've had like 3 missions, 2 open combat missions, and this other one that plays a bit like an open combat mission, where you're just in kind of very bland areas fighting a load of enemies. There's no unique sort of gameplay features. I suppose in Precious Cargo there's the moving cranes, but that's about it. There's no kind of, hey, you should use this weapon. There's no kind of hook to any of these missions. They're just all super bland with very little story to them. Then you have Deep Cover, which is this game's stealth mission. It's kind of hilarious. It's a stealth mission where Laswell is the main character. You know, Laswell is someone who we see later appears in public as kind of the face of the CIA. And apparently, you know, she just puts a hat on and then she can go undercover in a Russian military base. We're in Verdansk. It's using the airfield from Verdansk, and unlike the prison from the first mission from Operation 627, it doesn't really feel like they've done anything to kind of spruce it up or make it look spectacular. It just looks like the airfield in Verdansk. And for this mission, the stealth involves you walking down literally 2 paths. You walk down one path, you turn right, and you walk down another path, and you have to try and make sure you don't stand too close to the enemies. And like, you can literally just walk around them. I think there's even some objective for completing this super quickly, because you don't have to do anything at all really. Then you walk into a room and kill an officer from the Russian army and a random soldier, to get an access card, and that's it. And it feels a little bit harsh that you're killing them. Like, as far as I know, they haven't done anything wrong, but you just kill them to get this one access card. And then you go into a building where outside, any soldiers see you, any soldiers get within a few feet of you, and they're like, hey, you need to stop. Like, they're going to find you out. But then you use the access card and go into a room where there's like 5 people looking at you, and apparently that doesn't matter. And then you go into another room just so Laswell can speak to Yuri. That's what this whole mission was for, was so you could speak to Yuri. But then it also happens to put her in the path of these missiles. The missiles come in, gas everybody. Obviously, it's set up so it looks like the ULF are attacking Russia because, you know, Makarov's trying to do this false flag thing to make everyone think that the ULF are attacking Russia, even though, as far as I know, the ULF and Russia have been at war for a while, so I don't really see why that would be such a big deal. I guess them using chemical weapons would be the big deal. But anyway, then you escape there, and there's kind of a cool section where you're escaping the building while the gas is affecting everyone. But there's some weirdness about this too, where Yuri just disappears. He just says, I'll get out a different way. We can't be seen leaving together. So they go a different way. That almost seems like they didn't have time to necessarily program him to be following you, his animations to be going through everything like this. And there's a lot of times in this game where the animations seem like maybe they couldn't be bothered, but maybe they didn't have time to do it properly. So instead, you just kind of run through a few floors and get out. And again, it feels incredibly short. Like, essentially in this mission, you've walked down 2 paths and then climbed up a few sets of stairs, and that's it. Like, the mission's over. There's no interesting stealth mechanics. Again, the story doesn't really make sense as to why Laswell would be doing this. All of this just, you know, killing a Russian officer just to go say hi to Yuri, really. It feels super bizarre. Then you get Passenger, and Passenger seems like an more interesting one. Obviously, this is this game's kind of version of No Russian, which makes more sense if it's a Modern Warfare 2 game, but it's in Modern Warfare 3 now, where Makarov is doing this false flag thing where he's trying to set it up to make it look like the ULF are bringing down a passenger plane, a Russian passenger plane, and you play as the point of view of one of the victims. They tie it into Farah in this really haphazard way where it's like this character who apparently worked with Farah a long time ago is the person who's picked for it, so it looks like it's a ULF thing. But, you know, it's a pretty cool mission in terms of it looks really good, the environment looks really good, there's some kind of unique gameplay and stuff like that. Again, incredibly short, you know, not a long mission at all, but it's kind of an interesting point, and it shows how Makarov operates. It shows, like, Makarov's way of trying to set up some kind of war. Although, again, making the ULF look like it's doing bad things to Russia seems like a lot less important than making it look like America was attacking Russia, which is what happened in Modern Warfare 2 the first time round. Then you have Crash Site, this very nothingy mission again that was quite similar to a mission from Modern Warfare 2, but the newer Modern Warfare 2, but less interesting. So in that one, you were going to the crash site of a helicopter, and it was burning in the night, and you could kind of do a bit of stealth, and then you had a massive gunfight, the helicopter thing. In this, there's just a few buildings around the plane crash site. You go down there as Farah, and you pick up a few phones, and you kind of wander around and kill a bunch of people, and then you help Alex kill a few people and leave. And that's kind of it. Like, again, no big story things other than showing that the ULF were framed, which is something that we as the players already know, so no real story revealed in this at all, and no interesting gameplay, no interesting gameplay mechanics, no big climax to this mission or anything like that. Just nothing really happens. When I played it, to be fair, Alex seemed to glitch out. He was just sitting there as if he was being held hostage or something, and there was no one around. I'm not 100% sure what's meant to happen at the end of this mission, but for me at least, nothing happened. Then you have Flashpoint, and this is one that I think some people have made a bigger deal of than I probably would. This is in Verdansk Stadium, so again, lots of reused assets. Verdansk Stadium doesn't look like it's been made to look really fancy or anything like that. It just looks a bit like it did in Warzone. And again, it's a bit like No Russian, lots of civilians getting killed, and you're kind of going in. This is meant to be a flashback back to when Task Force 141 captured Makarov the first time round. Not really sure why we need to see this. Again, it doesn't seem to add anything to the story other than showing, hey, Makarov's a bad guy and Task Force 141 are the people that captured him in the first place. But anyway, you get to go through Stadium while lots of civilians are getting shot, and you get to go capture Makarov, who for some reason is driving around in the tunnels below in an ambulance, and I'm not really sure what that's about and why you managed to escape with him relatively easily. It seems super strange. But anyway, that's a mission in there, and again, you know, no real new assets or anything. Then you have Oligarch. Oligarch's a kind of interesting mission just because it uses a location that I don't think we've ever seen before, and it looks really nice. Like, the graphics look really nice, you get to use the water a little bit, there's a cool little cave tunnel that's a little bit hidden, there's a few different ways you can approach it. It's one of the more interesting open combat missions, but the story of it doesn't seem to make a huge amount of sense. It's essentially like Soaps going in to try and hack into the computer of someone who works for Makarov so he can steal her money, so she'll give up where Makarov is, or where someone who works for Makarov is. And that seems super bizarre. You know, we've already established in the cutscenes that Makarov cares about loyalty more than anything else. The idea that they could literally just take the money of someone who works for Makarov, like one of Makarov's highest ranking helper people, and they'd immediately fold and give in and give them the information they need. And then they just leave her. You know, she could have just lied about where he was, but they just leave her. It just seems really strange. The story for this feels like it wasn't fleshed out at all. But the environment is very cool. I kind of assume we'll see this as a multiplayer map at some point in the future, because it is a very cool environment. It just feels like the story's kind of lacking there. And again, there's no gameplay mechanic. There's no gameplay hook. There's nothing that's different about it. Then you have High Rise, which was probably my favorite mission actually in the game. I enjoyed playing it, but again, it's super simple environments. You know, you're just going around this apartment building, going up for it. There's lots of different routes to get up. There's actually an achievement for completing this, or getting to the final part of this, in 45 seconds, because once you've done it once, you can do it super, super quickly. But it's kind of interesting going through, felt a little bit like the raid, felt kind of atmospheric. But again, the story is just kind of completely missing. You're going through to try and capture someone who is one of Makarov's helpers so you can find out where Makarov is. And, you know, it says, oh, make sure you know, don't kill him because we need to capture him alive. I literally walked up to him and shot him with a shotgun in the chest, and apparently that was fine. Apparently that was what I was meant to do. There's some real weirdness in this, like Price is there at the end, and he just kind of walks around crouched behind a riot shield, and it looks really weird, like the animations are really janky, and Price is like, oh no, you know, loads of people are going to come attack us. And there's like hardly anybody comes to attack you. It's really anticlimactic. You have the skyhook escapes that we've seen before in a Call of Duty campaign mission. It's just another one of these missions where it's a very bland, uninspired environment with lots of reused assets. All the traps and stuff is, you know, things we've seen before, just like the laser trip mines and claymores and stuff. There's no hook to it. There's nothing unusual about it. I feel like if this had been in a previous Modern Warfare campaign, maybe there would have been some sections where it would be like shooting through walls, like that Camden mission in Modern Warfare 2019. Or maybe there'd be something where you're kind of, you have people shooting across between, you know, across the courtyard on the different floors. Maybe some floors that could give way and explode so people would like fall down from above or something like that. But there's nothing like that. Like, no interesting new gameplay mechanics in this at all, really. Then you have Frozen Tundra. This is another one of the missions where it's got some, you know, unique assets. It's got a really nice cinematic at the beginning of it. In the story, you're sort of attacking this convoy from below the ice, and you get Shepard. You don't really know who's being transported, but you get Shepard. I think you think that you're getting Makarov, but you get Shepard anyway. And they're all kind of spies. Then they have to escort Shepard across the ice to try and extract. It's got some kind of interesting gameplay stuff, like the fighting against the snipers and needing to use the thermal scopes and stuff like that. I think they try to do something interesting, but it kind of doesn't work that well. Like, the environments end up looking quite bland in it. It doesn't maybe look as impressive as you'd hope from the cinematic. And the gameplay doesn't end up being that interesting. Like, fighting snipers is just shooting some people in ghillie suits as they run away from you. That's basically it. The weirdest thing about this is Shepard's model. Shepard's model looks super weird. His animations look really weird. The conversation is super stilted. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is, but I don't think that was originally meant to be Shepard in that mission. Then you have Gora Dam. This is another one that's just reused assets. It's using the Warzone, you know, dam area from Verdansk. The lighting does look kind of cool on it, but the actual environment doesn't look like it's been changed that much to fit this mission. It doesn't look like it's been crafted to make the mission interesting. Instead, there's just like 4 bombs you have to disarm by walking up to them and interacting with them. And then you get on a helicopter and leave. And that's it. Like, again, no story missions, you know, no story sort of beats in it. The story is essentially, oh, the Connie forces are going to try and do another false flag attack, like yet another one where they're going to blow up the dam, so you have to stop them. And it's like, that came out of nowhere. Like, it just sort of seems completely random and just thrown in to fill up a little bit of time. And the mission itself is super boring. Again, no new mechanics, no new hooks or anything like that. just interact with these 4 points and then get on a helicopter and leave. And that's kind of it. And it's quite a small area as well, compared to even some of the other open combat missions. Then you have Danger Close, an AC-130 mission. We've had a bunch of these in Call of Duty before, and this one has nothing interesting about it at all. You're just literally in an AC-130 shooting down at a military base. It's almost like they just wanted to give Graves something to do and been like, oh, remember when he had an AC-130 in the last game? Let's do that again. But instead of in that one, you know, you seeing people moving around a lot and like having the different vehicles and the buildings that get destroyed and stuff like that. In this, it's just kind of, oh, you're just shooting a military base, don't shoot these 2 hangars, but shoot everything else. And that's it. No twists, no unique hooks, no real story beats. They're just, you know, looking for some weapons, they're looking for some missiles, they try to make them safe, and then you blow them up. That's kind of it. Very, very boring AC-130 mission. It just seems like complete and utter filler. Almost like they were thinking when they got to this point in the game, oh, we don't have a vehicle mission. Normally Call of Duty has a vehicle mission. We'll just throw one in here. Then you have Trojan Horse, which is the final mission. It starts off on the south bank of the Thames in London, and you kind of are following a hacker who's going to meet someone else who's working for Makarov, and then you're following him so you can try and work out where Makarov is. And somehow he ends up going somewhere that leads him to the Channel Tunnel. And the game says the Channel Tunnel's in London, which it's not in London. It's quite a long way away from London. You can get a train in London that goes to the Channel Tunnel, but it travels, you know, through quite a lot of England. You have to go through most of Kent before you get to the tunnel part. But anyway, it says the Channel Tunnel's in London. Then you go into Channel Tunnel, and I think the idea is that Makarov is setting up some bombs in the Channel Tunnel, that somehow that's going to have a really bad effect on Europe. I'm not quite sure how. It feels like if you wanted to disperse something, doing it in a tunnel that's literally beneath a sea is maybe the worst place to do it. And if you're on the run from the authorities, going down underground somewhere that only has 2 entrances with very heavily guarded entrances at both sides is probably the worst place to do it. And there's loads of things that don't make sense in this mission. Like, you're going into Channel Tunnel, the trains are constantly going through, and they say something like, Makarov's controlling the trains. The trains aren't automatic, the trains are just trains. Like, people drive the trains, like train drivers drive the trains. And they run over people, they go through gunfights and stuff, and they just keep on coming, they just keep on sending them. You'd think very quickly, as soon as there was like the slightest hint of gunfire or an explosion in the Channel Tunnel, they would immediately stop everything. It's just an utterly bizarre mission. And I was expecting it to build up to something like Mission Impossible 1 and there to be some sort of fight on one of these incredibly high-speed trains. But no, nothing as exciting as that. You're just like in a tunnel fighting a couple of juggernauts. And then obviously you have like Makarov killing Soap and then getting away. And then you've got the final little bit where Shepard gets killed. And that's the entire story. That's the story of the Modern Warfare 3 campaign. And I said this in a video that I did yesterday where I was saying how disappointed I was with this, that one of the biggest problems is there is no real story in this. Like, nothing really happens. Makarov is introduced, and we know what he's like. You know, Makarov, false flag operations, trying to start a war. That's all that we find out in his story. That's all that essentially happens up until the last mission. So all of this is kind of wasted. You know, you have the first one where Makarov escapes, and then you have the passenger mission where it kind of shows, okay, this is the sort of thing he does, which is just retreading the same kind of ground as Modern Warfare 2, the original Modern Warfare 2. And then all of the rest of it, nothing really happens. You know, there's a bunch of stuff about missiles that never really affects anything. No one seems to care that those chemical weapons hit Verdansk. I mean, Verdansk has been nuked before and everyone's forgotten about that, apparently. They had a zombie invasion there, and that's not in the story anymore. But yeah, it feels really, really strange. Like, maybe originally this campaign was designed to just introduce Makarov. And now we're going to get to the bit of the video that probably is what a lot of people wanted. What do you think the original DLC plans were for Modern Warfare 2? I think it was originally meant to be like a very short campaign. Like, oh, I mean, it was already short. It's like 3.5 hours. I think it was meant to be like an hour, 2 hours of extra content just to introduce Makarov. So this is how I think it would have gone originally. And it would have been a much better campaign in some ways. So I think originally we would have had Operation 627 pretty much as it happens anyway. The big twist being that you're actually the Russian soldiers helping break Makarov out. I think that would have been, you know, pretty exciting. It could have done with being a bit longer, but that ends with Makarov being out and finding out that he's garnered this sort of support army that are going to be helping him. Then you can get rid of all of these. None of these matter. Precious cargo, reactor, payload, deep cover, none of those matter. Farah doesn't really need to be involved in this. it seems weird that Makarov is so obsessed with setting up the ULF to make them look like they want to start a war with Russia, because, you know, the ULF are already at war with Russia. It just seems bizarre. You know, the original Modern Warfare 2 idea of Makarov trying to frame America for starting a war with Russia, that makes a lot more sense. That's a lot more interesting and dramatic. So I think you can just kind of get rid of precious cargo, get rid of reactor, get rid of payload, get rid of deep cover, and then instead go to passenger. This would be the second mission. This shows Makarov's out, and the first thing that he does is frame someone for bringing down a Russian passenger plane. That's something that kind of has ties to the original No Russian, kind of makes sense, establishes Makarov as this kind of ruthless, absolute psychopath that just wants to do anything he possibly can to get Russia involved in a large-scale war. And, you know, it has the unique assets, it has the unique gameplay, just like that first mission did. Then you can get rid of Crash Site, because that's just a Farah mission, doesn't matter. Get rid of Flashpoint, because why do we need to see how Makarov was captured in the first place? I don't think that's important. Oligarch potentially could have still been in it, I think. I think Oligarch could still be a mission where maybe then Task Force 141, after they find out about Passenger, that's when they get involved for the first time in the game, and they're like, okay, we're going to go after some people that we know are connected to Makarov. We are following the money trail or something like that. So then we're going to do it. And then it can show off, you know, it's an open combat mission, a new style of gameplay. If this was the only open combat mission in the game, a new kind of style of gameplay, new location. Again, the graphics look really good. Notice the 3 missions I've picked so far, like Operation 627 and Passenger and Oligarch. They're all the better looking missions out of the game so far. That could have been in there. Then it goes to Frozen Tundra. You've got the information from Oligarch. You can skip High Rise because that doesn't do anything for the story. Then you have Frozen Tundra. Again, another one of the missions where the graphics look a little bit better. It looks like maybe it's been worked on for a little bit longer. But instead of it being Shepard in that car that you get out, because like I said, his model seems really weird, the animation seems really weird, I think it was meant to be Makarov in there. I think you are meant to get Makarov like the original plan was, and the idea is that you capture him, and weirdly the mission all goes more easily than you would have expected. And you still have some unique gameplay and stuff like that. There would have been an opportunity maybe for a bit of sniping and things like that. Having that kind of sniper battle in the snow would have felt really different, would have been quite a cool mission. Then you can get rid of Gorodam, you don't need that, it's got nothing to do with anything. Get rid of Danger Close, you don't need that. And you go straight to Trojan Horse, where it turns out, you know, Trojan Horse, the name itself is kind of someone infiltrating from within. The idea that maybe Makarov actually intended to get captured by Task Force 141, and then he used that to somehow lure them into, to convince them that something was happening. You know, he could tell them that he'd planted bombs in the Channel Tunnel to try and take out some of those trains. And he lures them into the Channel Tunnel, and that's where something happens where he ends up killing Soap and escaping using the trains or something like that. And now there's been this big disaster or even terrorist act. Task Force 1 seem to be taking the blame for it. It's weakened relations between whatever country Task Force 141 is associated with. Maybe America, you know, maybe Laswell ends up getting involved in that way and sort of taking the blame, or Shepard, or Graves, whatever. And then that set up Modern Warfare 3 perfectly. That, you know, Makarov is the villain, there's tensions, Task Force 1 is essentially disavowed, like Mission Impossible style. I think that would have been awesome. It would have been a coherent story. It would have been short for sure, but it's just a little expansion to kind of go between the two games. I think that would have been a really cool idea. All of the other stuff in this, like to do with Farah, to do with Shepard, to do with Graves, I don't think really needed to be in it. Like, they could have maybe come back in. I mean, Graves didn't need to come back in at all. They didn't need to resurrect him. That was really stupid. But they could have done without Shepard and Farah and maybe brought them back in Modern Warfare 3 in another way. You know, maybe Task Force 141 would turn to Farah because she's the only person that would still believe them and still be willing to support them. Or maybe they'd have to turn to Shepard, you know, as someone who knows them to try and get resources and things like that, even though they don't trust him. It could have led to a more interesting Modern Warfare 3 rather than the one that we got. So, that's my idea. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think I'm right? Do you think this is how the DLC was meant to go? Do you think what we ended up getting was better or worse than that? Of course, while I haven't been a big fan of Modern Warfare 3 so far, I am excited to give Modern Warfare Zombies a go on Thursday, so I'll be streaming it right here. So make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.